Get us started. All right, welcome everybody to today's Indivisible TX Lege live session, September 30th, Wednesday. Excited to be with all of you today. Right now, we're going to focus on a very important topic. And the thing we want to really center our live session around is how has COVID-19 impacted the work of the Texas Senate and House of Representatives in between legislative sessions. And I'm happy to have Robert Norris, our Indivisible TX Lege Education Huddle Lead, research extraordinaire, and just super amazing person join us today. Welcome, Robert. How's your day going today?
My day's going great. Love this weather. Thank you very much.
Super nice.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm going to hand off the reins to you, Robert. Guide us in this conversation around what work is happening and how it's looking different for the state legislature.
Okay, yeah, well, let's get into some background first. Viewers probably know that the legislature meets about 5 months every 2 years. What you may not know is they are actually doing some legislative work between those sessions. And that period between the sessions, that's what's known as the interim. One of the main things they do is they participate in the interim committee process. So, you know, interim committees, they're what the name suggests, committees that meet during the interim. As interim committees, their main job is to complete assignments that are known as interim charges that are given to them by the House Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor. Why do these interim committees actually matter to you? Well, they're important because the charges that they're given relate to really important topics like healthcare, human services, education, transportation, as well as they find out about how bills that were passed in the last session are actually being implemented. So let's talk about their process. Well, usually, the committees, interim committees, are following kind of a 3-step process. First of all, they actually do work with the leadership, the Speaker's office, Lieutenant Governor's office, to identify what those charges should be. In addition to, you know, finding out about how bills are being implemented, they'll look at some, you know, drill down topics like in human services, you know, Medicaid costs. They'll look at long-term care, they'll look at STAR testing, you know, that kind of thing. So those are the charges. Then after they get the charges, they hold public hearings. And in these public hearings, they've invited certain groups to come forward and provide testimony, both oral and written. And they've also invited the public to come in and talk to them about, you know, their input, their views, their opinions about each of those interim charges. So, you know, they gather a lot of information this way. Then once that's completed, the committee staff gets involved with the members and they write up their findings that go into a document called the interim report. And that interim report is then, you know, reviewed by the committee members, it's adopted, and it's published. It's a published document that's put on the House and the Senate websites. Now, because of the pandemic, we no longer have a normal process. And the reason is twofold. First of all, effective March 18th, the Capitol and the underground extension have been closed to the public. Members of the legislature can go there, their staff, but not the public. So all of a sudden, you can't hold hearings in the Capitol or in the extension. Well, you know, the way some entities, some businesses, and some local governments will deal with that is they'll find an IT fix for that, right? They'll have Zoom meetings. They'll get live streaming remote testimony from some other place. And, you know, they'll fix it that way. So why can't the interim committees do that? Well, unfortunately, their rules are very antiquated. Their rules prohibit them from having virtual meetings from having remote testimony. They can't do it. They're not allowed to do it. So all of a sudden you have these two roadblocks that are thrown up into the normal interim committee process. Well, what are they going to do? So what they're doing on the House side is those interim committees have put out notices. We want any and all groups related to these interim charges to send us written testimony. And we want written testimony that's, it's not, absurdly long. It's not going to be a full, like doctoral dissertation, just a few pages, graphs, what have you as attachments, and send that in. So, it's from those invited groups, and it's also coming in from the public. So they're gathering all this written testimony, and then, and we'll see just in a minute how that's, how you can access it. Then it's being posted on the House website. So let's go there. Let's go there right now.
Tell you what, Robert, just to recap a little bit of what we've shared so far, I find this fascinating, and I think this is one of the things that maybe Texans across the state might not realize is happening, because our legislative session is very concentrated every other year for about, it's 140 days, correct?
Yeah.
And we feel like that's when all the business is happening, because that's when bills are passing, and that's when things are going to be changed. But what's really important in this is that in the quote-unquote off-season, if you want to call it the interim between legislative sessions, there's a huge opportunity for advocates, for the public, to be able to engage our legislative body and have a dialogue around what we can do to improve Texas and pass bills in the upcoming legislative session. And so this opportunity for engagement sometimes is not realized by all of us in Texas, that we can really organize and have a much more in-depth conversation potentially with the representatives that we have around these particular items. Now, of course, there's going to be questions around, well, who establishes the interim charges, and why are they focused on this particular area, and who is getting, formally invited, potentially the feeling that they have a stronger voice. And all of those questions are valid, but I think number one is for people to realize that there is an opportunity for you to get involved and engage with the state legislature around issues and areas that you see need improvement in our state. And the traditional process Robert was talking about is definitely an important one. So I'm excited now for you to dig in and show us what those changes look like and how people are engaging in this time.
Okay. So let's look at a couple of screens that will allow you to see what I'm talking about. All right. So this right here, can everybody see this? All right.
See it?
This right here is the House of Representatives main page, and you can see at the very top, there's some links there that will take you to information about the members, the committees, news, research, etc. And there's, of course, the current speaker. On the right are their press releases. And then down here, what's happening. This is really the best area for everybody to go check out. First, I'm going to show you what I was talking about a minute ago, interim committee reports, charges. This is that letter that comes from the Speaker's office that shows for each of the committees, for example, everyone's favorite, the Committee on Livestock and Agriculture. They're going to look at things like Department of Agriculture's practices about crop diseases and plant pests, things like that. And it goes on down alphabetically. looking at, say, appropriations, public education is down further, that sort of thing. Okay, so that's the main page. Now let's look at the really interesting part. I was talking about the written testimony that's been solicited, that's been requested by various committees. So how that worked was each of these committees, and let's take a look at one of those. Say higher education, interim charge. Let's look at interim charge 2 because that one's pretty, easy to understand. So this notice of formal request for information from the Higher Education Committee. It's related to Interim Charge 2, which we'll see what that is in just a minute. Went out Monday, August 3rd. Chairman is Democrat, Republican Chris Turner. So the committee has requested submissions from universities, TSTC. They tell you who to send it into. And they say that they want the submissions to be given to the members in the committee by September 1st, and then they'll be circulated after that September 1st deadline. So here we go, we're talking about infrastructure needs, and in particular, as a result of the pandemic, have the infrastructure needs of these institutions changed? And you can see the specific questions here about House Bill 2000, institutional needs, are there federal funds to help out? How has this affected borrowing costs? Any benefits? Well, now we're getting into some really detailed stuff that you don't need to know about, like tuition revenue bonds. So let's go back.
Fascinating is looking at these charges is that these charges are not glossing over the situation. They're not just trying to appease people and say, oh yeah, we looked into it. They're really wanting specific information to understand what's going on. And it's actually encouraging to see the depth of the conversation that people are engaging in around the impact, for example, for higher education and COVID.
Mm-hmm. Right, and you'll see it, that conveyed in the responses. Let's go to Interim Charge 2 responses. So these are all the entities and the link to their responses that have been provided to the House Higher Education Committee. And you can see there's, these are the main university systems: Texas Technical College, the Conservative Coalition Research Institute, Texas Williams Women's University. So let's go at the top here. You're actually going to see all information on all of the UT system components. In other words, the universities themselves. So as a result of the pandemic, has your infrastructure needs changed at all? Let's go down here and look at what UT Arlington is saying. Well, UT Arlington is going to need larger classrooms, according to them, and class labs to accommodate social distancing. It's not an immediate need, but a long-term infrastructure need. So then they go talk about, as enrollment grows, and we might need to have some kind of hybrid modality for, maybe like virtual teaching, teaching studios, online learning, that kind of thing. UT Austin, on the other hand, has said that no, their infrastructure needs haven't changed. UT Dallas, they seem to be okay. UT El Paso, in the short run, they just needed to expand to accommodate remote learning capacity. So you can get a sense here, you're interested in these universities and what they're going to have to, how they're going to have to adapt and what that means for their facilities. Are their facilities going to be changed? Is that expensive? How much is that going to cost? What does this mean for the long-term educational capacity of these universities? And, you know, bear in mind, if you've been to a University of Texas campus, they're big. They take up a lot of acreage in any city that they're in. So that these have changes not only for the university, but a lot of times they would have implications for the cities that they're in. Okay, so that I think is really kind of the easiest example that I can show you for the responses that these committees have asked for.
I think one question that may be asked when you were looking at this, which I love how we're able to dig through the different pieces and steps of this, but when you look at the list of universities on the last page where it just had maybe a dozen or 10 different universities, we know that in Texas we have a lot of universities, both private, public, county, colleges. Do you have any insight on why the list of the universities that are listed, that these are the only ones that participated in giving responses or had responses posted?
Well, these are the ones that the committee specifically asked for written testimony on. And exactly what their reasoning is for just these, I don't know. You know, these are the big players in higher education. The other, of course, are the community colleges. And one thing I can tell you is that the whole method of appropriation for your universities is very, very different from community colleges. You know, for one reason, community colleges get local tax revenue. So therefore, their state appropriation is different. And these are the ones that are extremely expensive for the whole state to have to support. So I can see why they would ask them about that. And also, this has to do with facility funding and facility regulation by the Higher Education Coordinating Board, which is kind of like the overall statewide governing body for higher education in the state. So that, like I say, is kind of the easiest one to think about. You can, you know, there's some very interesting ones up here in human services. Let's see. Yeah, they have all the interim charges right here and over here, but the responses are here. Now, this gets into topics that people are probably very interested in. The main one that's been in the news a lot is the impact of COVID on long-term care facilities, right? You know, how are they dealing with the spread of COVID in nursing homes? What about visitation by family members to see people that are, you know, their relatives that are in nursing homes? These are things that are addressed by some of these entities here, right? So this is all of, you know, who they asked for. You saw that just a minute ago. This is one where they've consolidated all the responses into one document. And this is going to show you some background on what's happened so far. Nursing facilities, you know, the statistics on staff positive, residents positive for COVID, deaths in nursing facilities, you know, in facilities that have tested positive with COVID. And you can see this trend line going from the end of March all the way to September 22nd. That right there is some pretty useful information. This isn't the only source where you can get this, of course. You could get this from the HHSC and the State Health Department websites. So here's some information about their response activities. And And these are kind of like the main groups that are involved in long-term care facilities and how they're operated. But this digs down. You know, you were talking about specific information, Alex. This is a this is a pretty good document for finding out how the big how HHSC, the main Health and Human Services agency, and their constituents are dealing with the COVID impact in nursing homes. This talks about regulatory visits. And then there's some more testimony here, and it would take me a minute to find it, from a psychologist and his view about why it's important for relatives to be able to visit the people, you know, their seniors, their grandparents, their mothers and fathers that are in nursing homes, because that kind of tie-in is very, very important. So that goes down, that comes out of this document. You can find that information in what the House Human Services has received from people. And you can see there's the various associations, long-term care, disability rights, Texas, providers, private providers association, and, you know, Leading Edge, Texas. So, you know, you were talking about what are some of the important things that interim committees dig into. Well, this is going to show you. And in a way, this is actually, this kind of layout is not something you would get under the normal process. Normally, this kind of thing would kind of come out in a series of handouts, but it wouldn't be as well organized as it is here.
So now, reflecting on that, on one side, COVID has impacted the public's ability to be able to drive down to Austin, to show up at the Capitol, and to be able to give that public testimony. And we potentially may not have as much testimony as we would have in other years. So that's one of the disadvantages that we're in right now. But one of the positive advantages is that all of the information from organizations that have participated is now organized for us so that we can actually look into the details of the data and the positions and the perspectives of these different organizations. And so the big goal for maybe the next interim session is, how do we do both, right? How do we keep it all organized so the public can digest it? Advocacy organizations, entities across the state can digest the information that's being shared, but we continue to have access to the process as much as possible for the public to be able to engage. And so definitely some positives that we can share with legislators throughout the session and in the interim is to advocate for solutions like this, to where things are organized and we can go to a place within the legislative websites and really dive into the content. Because a lot of people wonder, well, how is Texas able to produce so many bills in their legislative session, 8,000 to 10,000 bills, and there's only 140 days? A big part of that is because all of that work is being done right now in terms of getting this testimony, these interim charges, bills are being crafted, and then they're just being, put into the process once the leg session starts. And if we're waiting for the leg session to get involved on how to advocate within the state of Texas, we really put ourselves as a disadvantage waiting till the leg session, because so much work has already been done for legislators to kind of position themselves in the perspective that they are seeking and the vote that they're wanting to make. And so if we are able to increase our engagement during the interim, this really helps us navigate the legislative session in a much better way.
Yeah, that's really true. Now, you'll notice on this screen here that some of the committees have received responses and some of them have not. One big reason for that, say, let's take public education. is that the deadline that they gave the public and the invited groups is today, September 30th. So they've probably started to receive a stream of written testimony, but probably not all of it. So they haven't posted the responses on this webpage yet. So one thing I suggest people who want to stay on top of this is to check this webpage on a regular basis to see, you know, oh, okay, now all the responses are posted. Now I can look at this. Another thing that I would note, though, is that there are 29 standing committees of the House, but 19 of those committees are on this page. So the question is, why aren't the other committees on this page? And from what I've been able to find out, the leadership has not really been very interested in sharing exactly what committees are going to be doing and are expected to do in lieu of written testimony. So say like the Homeland and Public Safety Committee, one of their interim charges is to look at the procedures that are followed for the prosecution of sexual assault. And how do they deal with the status of rape kits? Two very, very important topics. And yet you won't see them on this list of interim committees where they've sent out notices and received responses. So what to do about that? The main thing you can do in all of these instances is contact the committee. Well, during the interim, contacting the committee means contacting the chair of the committee, because they don't usually have enough staff to have, you know, staff both at the committee office and at the chair's office, and they have to have staff at the chair's office. So contact the committee chair and find out, okay, hey, why aren't you soliciting testimony? What's going on with that? Because we wanted to find out about how sexual assault cases are being prosecuted. We want to find out the status of rape kits. Doesn't look like are you going to be doing any work about that? Are you going to be getting any written testimony? This is a good way to hold the legislature accountable. And they need to be held accountable on topics, especially topics like that.
Yeah. It goes to show the disparity in terms of how this is utilized. You know, it's great that we have the interim charges and there's engagement, but it still shows it's not perfect yet. And there are ways that the public are not able to understand or engage what information is being shared with our legislative body.
Yes, yes. And, you know, the other thing to do is, of course, if you want to keep politics local, is find out who represents you in the House and contact that member also and find out, can you tell me what's going on with the interim committees? You know, find out what's going on with their committee assignments. Say like, we know that Representative Vicki Goodwin is assigned to the Homeland and Public Safety Committee. So, you know, find out who it is that represents you and call them to find out more about this process. Some of them will know, some of them may not know. But there's still people that you've elected to represent you, so you can contact them. So, you know, the next question is, what do they do with all this written testimony? Okay, there's another good question to ask the committee chair's office. So we see you're getting all this. Are you going to issue an interim report? What's going on there? Are you going to issue any press releases about what you're doing about that interim report? We'd like to know, especially as you mentioned, Alex, what happens in these interim committees with this testimony is a way for members to craft legislation, because they've done all this work. They know what, you know, their legislative priorities are. Now they've got this information here where they can craft bills. Well, be good to know what the interim committee is, you know, what their report says about this. because you're hearing from all these groups, but you're not hearing from how the committee itself is responding to it, what they think about it. That's really important.
Yeah, because the unfortunate situation is that all of this can go in one ear and out the other, and all the information in one way or another, it feels like it just ends up in the trash bin. And
Yeah.
legislatures just kind of still pursue what they're wanting to pursue. But as advocates, as you know, people who reside in Texas, we get to highlight and say, look, no, you were given this information. This is something we need to address. This particular bill or whatever you're trying to approach is still not addressing this. And it's an opportunity to be able to find partners and collaborators and advocacy to put that pressure on legislatures that they can't just ignore the testimony that they've heard from all of these different entities and organizations.
Yes. Okay, so that's what I can tell you about the House interim committees. Well, we know that there's two bodies. There's also a Texas Senate. Now, the Senate has not opted to go through a written testimony process so far. You know, there's a few months between now and January. They might go that route after the elections. We do know that Lieutenant Governor has established working groups.
This is Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick.
That's right. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick has established working groups to look at the impact of the pandemic on specific areas, public policy areas, such as how has it affected business and industry? What are they doing in response to that? How has the pandemic affected public education and public schools? These are all working groups that are looking at it. The thing about working groups is they meet and talk privately. They don't have public hearings. It's the absolute opposite of transparency. So they're not required to have any meetings. They can just have their own little Zoom call if they want to. And, you know, I think he issued that because he does want there to be discussion. He does want there to be some, you know, investigation of what these sectors of public policy or you know, how are they being affected? But he doesn't want that to be in the Senate, I guess leadership doesn't want that to be, you know, a public process. So that's going on. We don't know what's going to happen with that. And really, you know, like I said, there's no interim committee action that we know of. So the Senate is, you know, kind of blank space right now.
And in your experience, is this traditional with the Senate that they would take this approach by having work groups versus having committees that the public can engage and the conversation is much more transparent? Or is this something new that we've seen this year because of COVID or because of our Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, who has different priorities than transparency?
Yeah, yeah. This is the first time I've seen work groups happening in the interim. They do have work groups during the session. In particular, Senate Finance will have work groups instead of subcommittees that will look at, say, like, you know, you can see on this page, something similar would be Appropriations Subcommittee on Article 3. That's an article of the appropriation bill that has to do with public and higher education. So they would have working groups during the session in those about those particular topics, though they wouldn't have any public hearings. This allows them to work really fast if they want to. So that happens during the session. I've never seen it happen during the interim. During the interim, they follow that process that I mentioned a few minutes ago. You know, they have assignments, they hold public hearings, they consider all that, they issue an interim report, and, you know, like you were saying, that interim report provides information for developing and filing legislation. So they're not doing excuse me, they're not doing normal business either.
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation, and you know, our first kind of deep dive into interim committee work. And what's exciting that we are really, trying to pursue and dig through and offer people this information is that, we're going to have more opportunities to dig into more specific committees, more specific things that are happening. And so definitely we want everyone to join us and to let us know in the comments what you would like to dig into a little bit more. What are some, committee charges, some areas of advocacy and understanding that you would like to know a little bit more about? Because the word I keep using is fascinating, because I think this is what it is when you're not used to the ledge process and you look at our state legislature and you're trying to figure out, how do I engage this process? How do I understand, where's the, argument I need to make or the evidence I need to bring? Understanding the interim process and understanding how to navigate that is really, really important. And us as Texans being able to advocate for the solutions we want to see in our state.
Exactly. One more thing, we mentioned legislation. So in the past, members have been able to pre-file legislation. In other words, they've been able to file, develop, and create legislation, and then they could file it before the session starts. And the pre-filing period is generally November and December. So that's something to watch out for. I don't know if that's going to happen this time around, but pre-filing is another very important topic to get into. Maybe we'll talk about that at a future presentation on Indivisible TX Lege Live.
Awesome. Well, Robert, your just amazing background has provided so much to the organization, to the leaders, and to everybody who participates in organizing around Indivisible TX Lege. And I'm just so excited that we're able to start packaging this so that more of the public and more people will be able to get this information and understand it. So definitely, we're happy that you watched the live session with us. If you have any questions, put it in the comments. Continue to share it with your family, friends, organizers, your community, and let us know how we can continue to help inform and equip you so that you can navigate the Texas legislature effectively. It is just around the corner. We have our election coming up, so we definitely want to emphasize for people to get out the vote and to help make the election as impactful as we can for Texas so that we can have progress moving forward. But the ledge session will be right after that. And so this is great information to get us equipped and prepared for it. Thanks, Robert.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I hope this has been helpful. I can tell by your smile that maybe we accomplished that.
Absolutely.
All right.
We will join you guys again soon. Be on the lookout to our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and we're excited to continue to bring you more content around the Texas legislature. Goodbye for now.
Goodbye.